Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we're here with a review of...
I Wandered, Lonely as a Cloud.
Yes.
I had to look at it because I'll screw it up again if I tell you so. William Wordsworth, though, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud.
So we will start with two readings.
Certainly. Sure.
So that I may correct you.
Shut your mouth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be gay in such a jocund company. I probably screwed that word up. I'm okay with it. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth that show to me had bought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flashed upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. You never realize how terrible you are at reading things until you read it out loud and hear yourself.
Popcorn.
Because I go back and I edit these and I'm like, oh God, why?
I wandered lonely as a cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er hills, vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or a pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils.
So what do you think, Adrian? What's good, what's bad?
Okay, so three good things. The rhythm here is stupendous.
Okay.
Right, you can't get over that rhythm.
This is true.
The rhythm makes the rhyme feel so natural that you barely notice it.
Okay.
As a cloud saw a crowd, vales and hills, daffodils. And three, this is an extremely visually pleasing poem.
Okay.
You see this as it happens.
I think my first comment here will agree with that one. This is a great example of using visuals, perspective, color, things like that. This takes you back to remembering better times. We're going to argue that, I'm sure, but that's what I get from this poem. And this is a strong example of a nature poem that is, the word I use all the time, not too floral. This is not pawning over the beauty of nature, but it is.
Not too floral.
Not too floral.
It's about daffodils.
But it's about daffodils. That's what I'm going with.
Okay.
So what's bad about this?
Look, this is what it is and it says what it says, unless you're willing to do some work.
Okay.
So when it's taken at face value, it can be very pretty, but you might not get to the next layer of this poem.
Okay.
Two, there are days when something this sing-song will make me retch.
Okay.
Right? You read this on a bad day, it makes you sick. And three, in a cynical mood, that last couplet is murder. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Oh, does it?
I think we're going to agree some similarities.
Is that
here.
why you wrote this poem?
I think this one can be easily overlooked. Especially if you're just picking up, like here, a book on literature. This isn't one you're just going to be like, oh, I need to read this. It's very easy, in my opinion, to miss the concept of time and memory and whatnot. It's just that little pensive mood. That little dab right there, otherwise you miss it completely. And it might be initially off-putting because it is bright and happy and just wonderful. So I agree with you, actually, for once in my life.
Okay.
I feel good about agreeing.
And what was the best line?
The best line is the line which goes to the memory. God, I want to use two. So, for oft when on my couch I lie in a vacant or in pensive mood.
Okay.
Because that changes the poem.
For me, it is that first line, which doubles as the title, I wandered lonely as a cloud.
Okay.
Because the place in my life when I found this poem, I was looking... This when I was too lazy to consider myself a writer, so I considered myself a poet.
I like that.
I was looking for lines like that. I wandered lonely as a cloud. You're in, right? True. I wandered lonely as a cloud. What the hell does that mean? But I like the way it sounds. So for me, that's the best line here.
Okay.
So let's get into things.
What do you want to argue about first? Because I think we're going to disagree with everything here, because you hold this poem very high.
Yes, I do. But I would like to start with a little bit of, not necessarily background so much as framing here.
Okay.
This poem was published the same year that Napoleon invaded Russia and the United States Congress banned slavery import. The same year Henry Wordsworth Longfellow was born and John Newton of Amazing Grace fame died. This was published in 1807.
It's old.
This is very old. It does not feel old, though.
No, it doesn't. It does not read that at all, which is quite an achievement.
Right.
Especially for a poem that's 200 years old.
Yeah.
Plus.
Yeah. So you when you read this poem, it doesn't feel archaic. It does not feel... boy, what am I trying to say here? It does not feel like an ode to God, right?
Which a lot of the poetry of the time was.
Of the writing at this time was.
Yes.
So it feels like you took a trip to the park today.
Okay.
Read this poem, or wrote this poem possibly. You observed and lived this poem today. The second thing, for me, you say I hold this in a high regard. This might be the next poem I decide to commit to memory.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of layers here that don't get appreciated.
Okay.
And the last thing I have to say just on a surface level about this poem, I can't read this without thinking of Queen's I'm Going Slightly Mad.
Okay.
They mention daffodils in there. The whole video sort of this very light sort of thing, but you understand the deeper feelings underneath.
Myself and the majority of BookTube aren't old enough to remember what a music video was.
Queen and Freddie Mercury, you should be able to understand.
So I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
Okay. So
it's a pleasurable poem. It is. It is. In my opinion, and I know you're going to disagree with me, this is a sad poem, though. This isn't...
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
But I think that, okay, when reading this, does it read like a sad poem?
Absolutely not.
Very joyous.
Very
right?
joyous, very bright,
yes.
vibrant.
But is it?
No,
okay.
Absolutely not.
Well, give me your interpretation.
Okay, so on that line, the two lines that I picked as my favorite, oft on my couch I lie, for oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood. This was past. This entire poem is in the past. This was not yesterday. This was not last week. This is this man laying on his couch in solitude, assuming alone at this period in his life, trying to muster up those good old days.
The oomph.
The oomph. And that's what you remember. That's what you try. You look back on the good old days, and whether you look back with fond memories or look back with regret, that's what you always draw to as you age. This is the old man just laying there, assuming towards the end of his life, trying to summon back those good old days when everything was bright and okay, and he was wandering as free and as lonely as a cloud.
Okay, I would argue that's the second level.
Okay.
There, right? I think that if you take this on the first level, it becomes that loner guy who one time made a joke in line at Walmart and everyone laughed. Right?
Okay.
Because they're not really daffodils. These are people. I was alone at Walmart, and I noticed these people. I made that joke, and everyone was dancing. Right? It becomes that sort of the observation that becomes an end to a group. Because he feels a part of the sea of daffodils, does he not?
He does.
But he is still removed.
Okay.
So, but I think there's something I think there's something deeper here.
I just really want you to rewrite it now and like retitle it. I always pick the cart with a broken wheel. It'd make me feel a lot better.
That's what literature is, isn't it?
It is. It is.
You read a poem, you get inspired by something in your own life, you write that poem.
All literature is just stolen from previous literature, and that's okay. That is okay. So anyway, you ramble on about this a little bit because you have my attention, and I know you have more.
So, do you know the scientific name for daffodils?
No, I don't. I didn't look that up.
I happen to.
I know you did. Carry on.
It's Narcissus.
Okay.
This is from Linnaeus's Species Plantarum, which was published in 1753.
Okay.
Written, this poem, in 1807.
Okay.
So this was out there.
It was.
The daffodil as Narcissus was out there. Whether or not Wordsworth knew that, I can't speak for at this point.
People would have identified that more. As in today, when you say daffodils, nobody's going to be like, oh, those lovely fields of Narcissus.
Well, he is wandering by open water, is he not?
Yes.
What is such a lonely Narcissus doing by the water?
Are we getting into mythology now? Is that what we're pushing?
Right. Well, I mean, just out there on the open. It's just out there. Mm-hmm. He's Narcissus on the water.
Okay.
Right? So, let's take another step back. The word daffodil, do you know where that comes from?
No, I don't. Please tell me because you looked it up.
It is believed to be a derivative of asphodel, Asphodel, a flower connected with the underworld in Greek mythology.
Okay.
And is often planted on graves.
Okay.
So does that change things a little bit?
That does change things quite a bit.
When you hear this, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. When you know that this is Narcissus on the water and the underworld.
Okay.
Does that make it a bit darker?
It makes it entirely darker.
So let's take things backwards from there. Okay?
Okay.
Work backwards through the poem. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or a pensive mood. This was your choice for the best lines in the poem, right?
Yes.
Vacant and pensive, laying alone on the couch. What does that suggest to you?
Tuesday, but go on.
It reads a lot like depression, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It really does.
It doesn't read like just being alone. When you're depressed, you can't get off the couch. You can't even make that work. You are vacant in that mood. You are pensive in that state.
Okay.
So now we've got someone who's alone that identifies with Narcissus, and they're seeking water. So when you take it a little bit further, that previous stanza, a poet could not but be gay. Why might one use the phrase, I could not help but be happy? Because they are not happy. Correct? You are not happy, but something forced you into it. I could not but be happy.
Okay.
But why is he happy? Or she. The speaker is never identified by gender, I don't believe.
So if we are going with this whole on-running thing here, is this a suicide note?
That's where I'm sort of going.
Because, I mean, it's one of the final steps in, suicide is acceptance, and there's usually an overjoyance. It's, when the person comes out, and, they're finally in a good mood and everything seems okay, and then boom, done.
Yeah.
He's quite literally saying, and I'm dancing with the daffodils now.
Right. In a ward, you're only put on suicide watch when you start believing that everything's all right.
Correct.
When you start walking around and smiling, that's when
it's an issue. So that reading it is like that. That's I really hope some high school level reader watches this and gets assigned this poem, and then goes in and hits the teacher with that, and they're just like, no.
Well,
no.
We're getting to that.
No. Carry on.
Okay, so the first 4 lines of stanza 2. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. What strikes you about the visual there? The images involved.
Okay.
Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay.
Go on.
Well, we already know that these daffodils are pointing us towards death, towards the afterlife.
Okay.
We're being drawn in a very Christian world from the heavens downward,
Okay.
right? So why would one want to take us from the heavens downward?
Again, if we're going with your suicide prospect here,
You don't go to heaven for suicide.
the ultimate sin, so you're going straight down to the underworld with the daffodils.
So that does that change things a little bit?
I think it does.
Okay, so let's look at the first stanza here.
Okay.
I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats high over hills and vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. What a beautiful place for a cemetery.
This is true.
What a beautiful place for a cemetery. Is that where we're
Cemeteries
at?
almost always have nice, lovely trees, usually a body of water.
Got some shade.
You are a terribly dark person. I want you to know that.
Well, argue with me. Argue with me. Tell me I'm wrong.
I can't. And what's more disappointing with this is you had a couple days to prepare this?
Yeah.
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 I like really imagine you just like were sitting at your desk and you read it and all of a sudden something clicked and then you just went on a mad tangent.
Well, for me, it was the inclusion of daffodils. I didn't know why daffodils.
Okay.
All the flowers you could pick, right?
I picked daffodils.
Why pick daffodils? They seem rather, in their appearance, in the sound of their word, they seem sort of neutral.
Okay.
Right? They're just a nice looking flower. It's not a rose that is a gorgeous flower and has the thorns and there's a literary irony there.
Okay.
It's a daffodil.
Yeah.
So I looked into daffodils.
Okay.
And then when you're reading this backwards from the point of the underworld, things take sort of a twist. So let's look at that title. I wandered lonely as a cloud. But this poem is definitely about depression and self-destruction. I mean daffodils. It's definitely about daffodils.
Definitely about daffodils.
Not clouds, right? So what's up? What's up with that?
I don't know if you go from just a very basic standpoint where he's saying he's wandered as lonely as a cloud. I mean, isn't that like the typical image of a cloud that's just that one solitary one drifting?
Yeah, but why title it that when it's about daffodils? Why title it that when it's about that oft vacant and pensive mood?
Tell me why, because I know it's there. I know you're wanting to, just say it.
Well, it is the first line,
Okay.
which often poems simply accept as their title.
Yes.
But-
Mr. Dickinson.
But yeah, let's go ahead with that. Where do we start? I wandered lonely as a cloud. And where do we end? Dancing with the daffodils.
Do you think Dancing with the Daffodils would have been more apt of a title?
No, but I think what it is again,
The Descent?
I wandered lonely as a cloud, and now I'm dancing with the daffodils.
And I mean, if you're going from the perspective of the daffodils dealing with an underworld of sorts, you're going from literally the heavens to the under.
Yeah.
So,
we've got all these things going on, and you mentioned that this is in past tense, with the exception of that final stanza. For oft when on my couch I lie. That is happening now and it's going to happen again, right?
correct.
That is the acceptance of oft on my couch I lie. Tomorrow I might be there too. Next week, the month after. So why is he so lonely? Or she? Why is our speaker so lonely?
Again, from when I read it, the speaker struck me as, someone who has lived a life already. They're an aged individual. I assume with death comes loneliness and solitude. Eventually, all your friends are going to die.
Right, but is our speaker already dead?
Is our speaker already dead?
He's dancing with the
If
daffodils.
he's dancing with the daffodils and on his couch he's lying in a pensive and mood in solitude,
awfully vacant
awfully vacant
when you're dead.
No sign of motion. Yeah, there's a possibility he could be dead.
And I might be there tomorrow, mightn't I?
Yep, 'cause you're gonna be there a while.
And I'm dancing with the daffodils. Is our speaker here already dead? I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, Beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth to me the show had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or a pensive mood, they flashed upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. So that image of the waves.
Oh, it's an image of somebody, because it just went from, somebody recalling something, looking back on something. It's somebody observing from a distance now.
Yeah.
And if you're dead, and where else are you going to be? The cemetery, you're going to observe all of this.
But you wandered lonely as a cloud, high over the vales and hills. Those waves.
Okay.
Those waves, the waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves with glee. Might those waves be a reflection of the living world?
Could be.
Reflection of the living world?
Reflection?
We're speaking about Narcissus, are we not?
We are.
So might those waves be a reflection of the living world? And if the daffodils are the dead world, we think of it this way. The waves beside them danced, but they, the death world, outdid the sparkling waves in glee.
All right.
So the daffodils seem a lot more alluring than the waves. Death seems a lot more alluring than the living world.
I genuinely have nothing to say right now. I'm just going to sit here and to agree with you. You're on a glorious tangent. You really are.
Do you see what I just did here?
What'd you do there?
If you don't join our goddamn Patreon, I'm not writing your college papers anymore.
Oh, you do realize in like 2 years' time you're gonna have to go back and like look up all the published works on I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud and be like,
Well, yeah. Oh, I'm sure this is already out there. I'm sure this is already out there.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
I think it'd be very interesting to look it up and find out.
Yeah, and I would love to have access to that information right now. Unfortunately, normally you don't have access to those venues without being in college, right?
Correct.
Like, I don't know if you knew this, but when we were at Missouri Western...
We had access to KC Public Library archives.
Well, not just that. We had the... oh, man, I can't remember what it's called now, but all of the material that's being published right now...
Correct.
We had access to it through their website.
And it was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's not just free. That comes as part of your tuition.
Yes.
Like, you can't look it up on the internet now.
Correct.
I'll have to go back and see what that was called. But
So basically we're going to have to mug like a freshman or something.
Yeah.
To get this idea. So you ain't going to use it anyway, just let us.
hell, I didn't use it when I was in college. I wish I would have now.
What would you rate this?
I would give this 92 daffodils out of 100.
92 daffodils?
92 daffodils.
I was going to give it something high. I wasn't going to give it 90s. I'm afraid not to now because you may physically assault me on camera.
Well, okay, so before we get to your rating then, does this interpretation add to the poem for you?
Oh, I think it does. Absolutely.
Does it take this to a different place for you?
Oh, it's a completely different poem.
Does it raise it in your esteem?
I think it's more interesting now. I'd like to read it again and actually think about it a little bit more. You bastard. But I'll give it 88.
Okay.
I'll give it 88. That's fair to me. Anything you would suggest?
What would you have given it before?
Before this?
Yeah, what were you planning on giving it?
I was thinking 85, 86.
Oh, so I just raised it 3 points in your esteem?
3 points.
You son of a bitch.
Actually, I wonder if it's in here. I'm sure it is. No, it probably isn't.
I would suggest The Flea by John Donne.
The Flea.
Mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in the flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this could not be said, a sin nor shame nor loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, yea, were then married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge and you say we are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though yous make Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege 3 sins and killing 3. And there's one more stanza, but I'll leave that to you on your own. The Flea by John Donne.
I was trying to pull up a snippet, and I'm like, now there's no time, but I should
Okay,
have more.
well, that's what I was reading for.
But a poem, a nature poem,
Yes.
that is not about nature.
Okay.
The full collection, Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman.
Oh, okay.
You tell me that's about leaves of grass, because it ain't.
It's not,
We used to make this joke all the time in college.
but I do not like Walt Whitman.
Nobody likes Walt Whitman,
Okay.
except Walt Whitman. But there's a lot more going on there than talking about grass.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, if you do enjoy this and you would like to see more of Adrian rewriting poetry, for 20, 30 minutes at a time, while I just sit here in awe.
I will ruin everything for you.
That's what we do. So make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join us on this beautiful disaster.
Follow us on Twitter @StripCover and on Facebook @StrippedCoverLit.